It is an honor and privilege to welcome each of you to our ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. Ann and Nate, here we go.
The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum is excited to share its various field trips, programs, activities, and resources with you all.
The concept of liberty and freedoms is very important to American citizens.
The stages are predictable. So through this tool, we can predict that the other stages will happen. The Piccadilly Cafeteria in downtown Dallas did not desegregate in 1961 when many other Dallas businesses did.
Wow, that is so creative. Wow, you guys have such great ideas.
So here are some uniforms that were worn by Jews in different concentration camps. So right behind me is our boxcar.
Wow, what a year we've had. Good evening. I'm Mary Pat Higgins, President and CEO. I want to welcome you to tonight's Hope for Humanity virtual event. It's hard to imagine that a little more than a year ago, we opened the doors to our forever home, the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. At that time, we never could have imagined that only a few months later, we would have to close our doors because of a global pandemic. But true to our mission and our inspirational upstanders, we have persevered, remained strong and calm, and redoubled our efforts through the power of online platforms to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference. When we closed in March, we knew our mission had to continue no matter what. So, thanks to the hard work and dedication of our staff, such an incredible team of people, deeply committed to our mission, we made a pivot to virtual programming. And thankfully, you all responded by participating with us. Our work has not gone unnoticed. We have even received accolades from national media outlets, among them the New York Times, USA Today, and People magazine, for our ongoing educational programming. Since March 23rd and through the end of this month, we will have offered 107 virtual public programs. These have been programs featuring presentations, discussions, question and answer sessions, as well as movies, book clubs, and interactive tours of our permanent and special exhibitions. I'm especially proud of our programs featuring our survivors giving their testimonies, and our virtual programs with live experts discussing human rights topics such as human trafficking, the suffrage movement, disability rights, and our most recent compelling and important series on confronting racism. In addition, our museum team has been hard at work adapting our museum for in-person visits, following new and comprehensive safety guidelines, and in providing dozens of virtual programs, lectures, and field trips that teachers can bring to their classrooms. Recent events this year have brought into focus important and difficult issues that we, as a community and nation, must confront. As an institution, the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum has not been silent on important matters that require an ethical and moral response. These issues involve the uptick in anti-Semitic actions, racism, and hate speech, which, like the ongoing pandemic, are deadly, but have roots in a nefarious source, the virus of bigotry. On a local level, we have seen our communities buckle due to social strife and racial injustice, and we, as a museum, a vital member of the community, have stepped up to become part of the solution. By our presence together here tonight, each of us demonstrate our responsibility to stand up to prejudice, hatred, and indifference when it arises, and we confirm our resolve and our resilience even as we endure the challenging effects of an historic pandemic. Over the last 7 months, as we endeavored to provide deeply important virtual educational programming, we have learned from our community and civic leaders that our work and mission are more important than ever. None of this would have been possible without the help of some very special people. First, I would like to thank our amazing board chair, Frank Risch, for his wisdom, his calm head, and steady hand as we navigated through the almost daily issues posed by the pandemic, and for his unparalleled commitment to the museum. Thank you, Frank, for all that you have done and continue to do for me personally, this board, our staff, and our institution. I also want to give special thanks to our inspirational board of directors for their steadfast support and outstanding leadership during this time of unprecedented uncertainty. I don't know what I would have done these past 7 months without your words of encouragement and concern. I am thankful for your dedication and leadership each and every day. To our staff, I thought we had bonded through the opening of the museum last year, but now I feel like we've been through basic training together. There is no team I would rather be a part of. Together, we can face any obstacle. You inspire all of us. To our devoted volunteers and docents who were eager to come back to work as soon as we reopened, we couldn't do this without you. And to each of you watching with us tonight, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you, our generous donors and members who have sustained us during this difficult year. Thank you for making the museum a priority in a year when there is so much need. We are eternally grateful for your critical support. And last but not least, a huge thank you to our incredible Hope for Humanity co-chairs, Fran and Mark Berg, and Peggy and Mark Silberman, and their amazing committee and honorary chairs for all of their lasting contributions. Who would have thought that a virtual dinner could be so successful? But with the volunteers we had, how could it not be? So, to each and every one of you, thank you for being a true upstander and for making a positive impact in our community and beyond. This evening, we honor our World War II liberators and survivors, upstanders of yesterday, today, and forever remaining in our hearts. From them, we continue to learn the lessons of the Holocaust. From them, we are inspired to discover, and for some of us to recover, what true strength is, what true tenacity means, what hope for humanity looks like. Just like them, we will emerge from this challenging time stronger and more resilient and more prepared to serve than ever. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the Reverend Mally Baum and Rabbi Brian Zimmerman.
Family stories tell us who we are and what we aspire to. From cover to cover, the book of family stories shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims is full of unlikely heroes who have held on to hope in the darkest of situations, who have carried on against all odds. Noah, Moses, Abraham, Hagar, Joseph, Jeremiah, Esther. For generations, these stories have been shared around campfires and kitchen tables, in cotton fields and jail cells. Throughout time, God's children have looked cruelty and injustice squarely in the face, then lifted their eyes to the hills, and by the grace of God, they summoned the courage to do what was necessary, not only to survive, but to be agents of change. May their stories not just inform, but form us. May we find ourselves challenged and encouraged and strengthened to likewise do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Amen.
Thank you for the honor to offer prayer to you this evening. My name is Rabbi Brian Zimmerman. I'm speaking to you from the sanctuary of Bethel Congregation in Fort Worth. Mort Leviton is my wife's grandfather. His story, like the story of so many liberators, is an incredible and inspiring one. If there is one lesson that I could take from the many that Mort taught during his life, the lesson would be that even in this well-documented and often tragic period, there are still wounds we cannot see, stories we did not know. Not only for the survivors of the camps or their families, those that were killed, or the refugees that fled, but also for those heroes who came to rescue. Mort Leviton never spoke about these events to his family. He held them in and kept them locked up, as if letting them out would somehow open the evil to roam the world once again. Why did he choose suddenly, after so many years, to tell his story? Just one reason: because he had a granddaughter who asked. That's all it took for him to open himself up to that dark place from the past. And so as we honor liberators tonight, we remember that there are still many painful, even if they are heroic, stories still locked away, waiting to be told. They are just waiting for someone to ask the questions so they can open the pages of their own scarred hearts and minds. We thank God for the gift of stories, the power to ask, the necessity to learn, the chance for healing, and for heroes who stood up to evil. For those still alive, we pray for the strength that they may make peace with the wounds of the past, so we can learn. Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim, we say. We praise God for the possibility of healing and wholeness to those alive who have locked away the stories and secrets, but are granted a second chance to speak and to return to life.
Good evening. I'm Mark Zilberman, and this is my wife, Peggy. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are honored to co-chair this year's Hope for Humanity celebration, along with our fellow co-chairs Mark and Fran Berg. I'm especially honored and humbled to serve as the incoming chair of the Museum Board of Directors, beginning my term in January. I want to take a moment to recognize Frank Risch for his outstanding leadership these past 2 years as board chair. Frank, your leadership and wisdom have guided this organization from its final year at the old Record Street location to last year's momentous grand opening and through the incredible and unforeseeable challenges of 2020. Thank you.
Normally, at this time, we would be exchanging hugs and family stories at this beloved dinner event. In this new reality of ours, we have had to discover new ways of greeting each other and finding community with one another. Although we are not together in person, we are grateful to share this virtual time with you, our museum family. A little over 40 years ago, a small group of Holocaust survivors came together with an extraordinary vision to teach the North Texas community the lessons learned from the Holocaust and to memorialize the 6 million Jews and millions of others persecuted by the Nazis. These amazing survivors saw as their legacy the creation of a museum for future generations of students and adults. And on a magnificent Thursday, September 18th of 2019, we celebrated the public opening of the new Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, a reality made possible by so many of you.
Hope for Humanity is the largest fundraiser for the museum. To be honest, when we initially began our fundraising, we were uncertain what we would be able to raise because we know the pandemic has financially impacted so many of us, both personally and professionally. In March, we were forced to pause briefly, but the museum team maximized that time to reset their tactics in order to best adapt to a new reality that was quickly unfolding. Throughout this time, your belief in and advocacy for our mission and work not only remained steadfast, but grew, and we are truly humbled by the outpouring of support. Tonight, I am excited to report that we far exceeded the revenue goal for this event. This was only achieved because of the generous support of you who are with us tonight. We wish to especially extend our thanks to our generous lead sponsors, Nancy Ann and Ray Hunt, Barbara and Stan Rabin, Fran and Mark Berg, Ann and Nate Levine, Sarah and Alan Losinger. This incredible achievement speaks volumes about your unwavering support of our work during this emotionally volatile time as we continue to battle the virus of bigotry and hatred in our community. As trying as these times may be, your support of the museum shows that we remain united in supporting our mission. The museum's mission to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference remains top of mind. Education is vital to ensuring that never again means never again. Thank you. Now, I'm pleased to let you know of an amazing offer by a couple who literally need no introduction. Ann and Nate Levine have generously agreed to a dollar-for-dollar matching grant. Here's Ann and Nate.
Nate and I believe it's essential to educate current and future generations on the dangers of bigotry, anti-Semitism, social injustice, and racism. We ask each of you here tonight to join us as we, together, help heal our community and our world by combating hatred of all kinds and pledging to be upstanders in our daily lives.
Ann and I certainly believe that the museum's mission has never been more critical than it is today. All you have to do is watch the news or read the newspapers. The virus of hatred and bigotry is all around us. Now more than ever, our community is in need of upstanders that are willing to speak up for human rights or when they see an injustice of any kind. Despite the incredible fundraising achievement tonight, there is still a need to help close the financial gap caused by this pandemic. It is undeniable that this has been a challenging year, but we are here tonight to tell you that there is hope and that one person can make a difference. Please consider joining Ann and me by digging just a little deeper tonight to ensure the future of this important organization. Through their educational programs that continue virtually and completely free of charge, they are inspiring young people to think critically and to act positively. While being a docent, I have taken hundreds of students through the museum and have been amazed at the changes that take place in them after they go through the exhibits. Thank you all for being here tonight and for investing in our mission to help make this a better world.
Thank you so much, Ann and Nate. Your continued generosity demonstrates yet again your deep commitment to the museum and its critical mission. And thanks also to Mark and Peggy and Fran and Mark Berg for your leadership that's made this event such a tremendous success. And thanks to all of you watching here tonight. You really got it. You recognized the enormous impact of the pandemic on the museum, and you really stepped up. As the museum's board chair ready to step down in December and hand over to Mark Zilberman, who I suspect will surpass all of us who preceded him, I want to take just a minute to recognize our deeply committed board of directors, our devoted volunteers, and the absolutely incredible staff of this museum. From Mary Pat at the top right through the organization, they are the best. And I don't need to tell you that it's been a year of the highest of highs and some of the lowest of lows. Just over a year ago, we opened the museum with this huge celebration, and to national acclaim, over 70,000 visitors came through our doors in the 6 short months till we had to close due to the pandemic and send our staff to work from home. And work they did, creating enriching mission-related programming that was streamed online, reaching an amazingly wide audience, actually nationwide. Throughout my involvement in the museum, now over 25 years, I've had this strong belief, a deep conviction that we need to tell the story of our survivors and liberators and the lessons of the Holocaust to preserve the evidence that informs that dark experience and keep the memories alive. As a museum that can connect the lessons of the Holocaust with the deeply troubling state of human rights in our world today, we've got a unique ability to convene conversations about the challenges that we face today in our nation and right here in our own community. This is an opportunity that's uniquely ours, and the moment for it is now. And I really believe that in having these conversations, hard as they can be sometimes, we've got the opportunity to help mend some of the divisions tearing at the fabric of our national soul. As the son of survivors who managed to escape Hitler's hell in 1938, as a family member who lost 69 relatives, and as a father, and maybe most important, as a grandfather, I believe we need to keep telling the story of despair, but also of hope, the story of upstanders like the survivors and the liberators whom we celebrate here tonight. When rage and anguish would have been perfectly understandable responses to what they endured, our survivors took a different path as they reclaimed their lives to share their experiences for our benefit, for our shared hope for humanity, telling the story over and over again. So we honor our survivors, those with us tonight and those of blessed memory. We honor them in perpetuity with our own lives lived in legacy to their purpose for all of humanity. So now it's my solemn honor to express our deepest gratitude to the survivors whose names are listed in the program. I'll read the names of those of blessed memory who have passed since our last Hope for Humanity event last December. And then as I conclude, you'll see the names of the survivors who are with us today. Ann Donald, Francis Kersner, Yael Rappaport, Jack Repp, Lily Wider, and Helmut Wolf. May their memory be a blessing.
When the United States entered World War II, young men 17 to 24 years old, barely out of high school, from small towns in Texas and across this country, answered the call to serve. These boys underwent basic training and were sent to fight an enemy that threatened freedom everywhere. They understood what they were up against and what they would encounter, but what they didn't expect, let alone prepare for, was what they faced when they came upon the Nazi concentration camps. These liberators never considered themselves heroes. They came home, became school teachers, bankers, lawyers, doctors, and business leaders, and they came home burdened with nightmares, depression, and other traumas from their sustained exposure to suffering and death. They came home transformed, bonded forever to the survivors they helped liberate, eyewitnesses to a history that none of us would ever wish to see. And most of them never talked about what they had endured.
Growing up in Dallas, I knew that my father, Lee Berg, served in the U.S. Army and fought in Europe during World War II. That was it. We were told it was a difficult time for him and it was taboo to engage him in discussion about it. We simply didn't talk about it, period. As a young adult, I finally convinced my father to participate in the oral histories being compiled by the Holocaust Museum Houston. I had no idea of his history, but I had a feeling it could be important. Both Fran and I were actively engaged in creating the museum at the time. After several attempts, my dad was finally interviewed in 1992. The interviewer called me afterwards and asked if I knew about my dad's history. Of course, I didn't. But I soon found out. He established the Red Ball Express to supply the front lines. He was a communications officer and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And, importantly, he was one of the liberators of Dachau. I never knew my dad was a hero. He certainly never thought of himself as one. While he faced tremendous challenges, both physical and mental, he thought the true heroes were the millions of Holocaust victims and the survivors. He was embarrassed by any recognition of his service for that reason. Fortunately, we have a record of his leadership and experience to weave among the stories of the many heroes who fought in Europe and liberated so many survivors from the intolerable actions of Nazi Germany. Due to the work of the Texas Liberator Project, we now have the history of over 500 liberators in Texas alone.
The Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission created the Texas Liberator Project in collaboration with Texas Tech University and the Texas Holocaust Museums. The project is an educational resource for the younger generations, teaching the history of the Holocaust and liberation. The website, texasliberators.org, was created to educate students on this vital history, from oral histories of the nearly forgotten, to the moral implications of one's actions, to an honor roll of liberators, many of whom have never received the recognition they so richly deserve. In telling their stories, liberators protect and preserve the values that beckoned them to Europe in the first place: freedom, morality, truth, duty, honor, and country. Through their actions, we honor the lives of every Jew and others lost in the Holocaust.
When my father was interviewed in 1992, he read from a letter he received on May 23, 1945, from Rabbi David Lefkowitz at Dallas's Temple Emmanuel. I'd like to read you an excerpt. My father was in tears when he read it for his oral history. I can well understand the effect that German brutality visited upon the Jewish people has had on you. Of course, every Jew feels the same way, but I wonder whether Jews will remember and the world in general will not forget. They are showing pictures of the horrors of the concentration camp here in the United States. But even these views may not bring home to some people, perhaps to many people, the lesson that underlies the whole horrible story. Namely, that we must guard against all outbursts of racial and religious hatred, and must conserve religion against that kind of paganism that made those horrors possible. I see you are working in a displaced persons camp. That must be a pretty sad place. Be as gentle and as thoughtful of those people as you possibly can. They have suffered much. On behalf of my family and the families of liberators around the world, please accept our sincere gratitude for the work to perpetuate the important lessons of the Holocaust, and for your recognition of these heroes who played such a critical role in bringing an end to that horrible time in our history.
On the 75th anniversary of liberation, there are thriving generations of families with us here tonight and around the world who wouldn't be here without the selfless acts of courage demonstrated by these liberators. We are indebted to them for their service and sacrifice, and we will forever look to their example as a standard of upstander behavior. When history called their names, in one moment, boys became men, and the ordinary became extraordinary. This tribute honors those during World War II who did not survive, those who liberated, and those who survived.
was no question as to whether or not we had a purpose, ever.
I was 18 in February, and the draft board said, you should go ahead and finish high school. We'll take you in then.
I played basketball. I was the leading scorer. I played football. I scored half of the touchdowns of the whole team.
5 days after I graduated from high school, I was inducted.
I still had one more year. I would have swept everybody.
Despite our youth, we felt that we were professionals, and that if Hitler continued, and if Hitler had not been challenged, that the world was in for a terrible chapter. We were inspired.
Survival was the only thing in mind. And we didn't know if we're gonna survive. How can you plan for anything when you don't know what your end is?
I knew there was danger, but that somehow, I had confidence in what's going to happen, that it's going to be okay. I will say that I really think my parents managed not to make me scared of things.
My sense of humor kept me alive. I have a marvelous sense of humor. For me, anything without a joke is nothing. Got to be a joke. And I think this helped me survive.
It was something so different than we had been used to seeing. You know, we saw a lot of dead Germans and a lot of dead Americans, but nothing like this. It's almost impossible to describe.
As he was going through Europe, he would go through these towns and he would see people and he would say, "Where are the Jews? Where are the Jews? Or where is the synagogue?" It was important to him to seek that out wherever he went, and no one had an answer.
I was alone, mind you, and I walked and I saw a giant wall right on the street. And I said, this is strange. I didn't know it was a prison camp.
Our division entered Czechoslovakia, and we went all the way to Pilsen. We had found a concentration camp called Flossenburg. And I walked to the back door to go see the camp. My sergeant says, "No, this is one detail you don't get."
I opened the gate. It wasn't even locked. I opened the gate, and as soon as I walked in, I heard, "Oh," but it was very muffled. And I walked in, and everybody was looking at me. Everybody was standing.
There was a young fella came up to me speaking perfect English. Looked like he was about 15 or 16 years old. And he said, "I see you have cross on your lapel. Are you a chaplain?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Could you think you could do us a favor?" I said, "Well, I could try." And he said, "First of all, I'd like to take you through some parts of the camp here." It turned out that this person that was talking to me was the young fella, Eliezer Wiesel, who's known better today as Elie Wiesel.
And there were some people in racks that I could see. They were laying down and all they did was got their heads up and looked and came right back down. They were dying.
As you've heard the expression, dead men walking. That's where the people who were in the concentration camp looked.
I looked at the prisoners in their striped garb. One of them moved, and I went over to him and asked him what his name was. His Nomen ist Hermann. Echet. My name is Herman too. And I opened my sea ration, made a little soup for him, and he died 2 hours later in my arms. I had tears in my eyes, and I cry every time I think about it.
I'll tell you that experience in Mauthausen melts you.
The thing that really disturbed me, I think, as much as anything else, was the mistreatment of the women. They were just absolutely treated terrible.
The mass grave was the most horrifying sight in my memory.
I think that I aged. I think that aged me.
It was unbelievable. We couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it.
That human beings would do anything like that.
Maybe there is a savagery potential within man. But unless that is curbed, we need to be reminded of what those excesses can produce.
Anything we can do to educate others about the horrors of such a thing so that they will do what they can to prevent that from happening. I think that would be the wish I would have for other people. It didn't take a majority of the Germans to become controlled by a dictator. You had to be very careful of people who say, let us take care of everything for you, because that's a very dangerous thing.
And the death of 6 million innocent people is something that we must not repeat.
We started seeing these people coming out from the trees, from the woods, and then getting in the road.
He would see these people running in like striped pajamas.
They would absolutely stop us and kiss the front of the tank, or they'd salute us. I couldn't help but cry myself. I had never seen anything like that. I couldn't understand.
We learned later that he was a part of the group that liberated Dachau.
The main thing we try to do is the ones that were still alive is to get them out and get them someplace and get them protected. Put clothing on them.
We got our carry-alls, those big trucks, and put people who could be carried in those things to a place where we could have a worship service. They had to be lifted on, had to be carried on, crying. They never thought they'd be alive. I was in charge of the worship service. And we had some little prayer books. I wish I had mine now, that were distributed among those that wanted them. And on one side of it was Hebrew prayers. The other side was English. They cried, they shouted. When they got through, they were just raising their hands in joy and appreciation. They didn't think they'd ever see that again. They didn't think they'd be alive.
It was like brother meets brother.
The first hour I was liberated, or the first minute, I cried and I left. I cried so much, I couldn't stop. An American captain came to me and he said to me in Yiddish, he says, Anish Kamal, don't be fearful. You're a free man. And took out and gave me a piece of candy.
Once we were liberated, then things changed, and that's where we chose to do something. And it was because the goodness that was done to us by the people that realized what we went through and that we were survivors.
Then I found out that Max was at Flossenburg. I says, Max, you and I have something in common. He says, what? I said, Flossenburg. He opens his eyes.
I used to see your dad when he was talking to school children.
Mm-hmm. He always believed that he was going to survive. He maintained his hope. He maintained his optimism. He always believed that he was going to get out of that alive.
I can't believe, after going through all the stuff he had to go through, that he could have
just that feeling for people and everything else. He was always up.
When he was in the camps, he would always dream about being a bird and escaping, or he would dream about being a wooden plank on one of the boxcars because they always left the camps. He had a good imagination. He wanted to be a witness. That's one thing also. He wanted to be a witness to what was going on. So he was also being very observant.
He always said, "There's my liberator."
When I was liberated, at this time I said to myself, I will never stop talking. If people want to listen to me or not. I have two people. If they listen for 5 minutes to walk away, I accomplish 5 minutes. And I never stopped because it's very close to me. Again, these people should know about it.
To Mr. Kogut and everybody who contributed to liberate thousands of Jews from these horrible camps, I want to say thank you.
It is my honor to thank you for serving this country. It is my honor to thank you for liberating.
Because without you, thousands of Jews would have continued suffered and died. And people like my grandmother and my families like my family might have not been here today. And I, for instance, might have not been here telling my grandmother's story to you. So, on behalf of my family and myself, I want to say thank you.
I lost 37 relatives on my father's side, including my grandparents and my aunt, and 22 on my mother's side, including grandfather. This day brings me full circle because I am here to remember them and to honor you as patriots, individual liberators who came to save thousands, if not millions, since my family was exterminated. It is never too late to honor those who liberated the camps during World War II. Over 70 years later, thank you can never express the gratitude that I feel, and those of us who are second generation and third generation, now even seeing some fourth generation. It is my feeling that these unselfish warriors who came to change the course of history deserve thank you over and over and over again.
And if you don't know, in our Jewish religion, if you save one life, it's just as good as saving the whole world.
קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך